You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
I think actions speak louder than words. Guys know there's going to be hell to pay when I come in with a single. And we try to build it to where you have 15, 20, 30,000 fans. Movies didn't do justice to his insanity because I wanted to win. It wasn't about the kids. It was about Rob. I was all about me. I was trying to reach my goals through the kids. It wasn't, me helping the kids reach their goals. My philosophy now is let's have fewer kids and spend more time developing those kids. And, you tell me, you can go to Stanford, you go to Harvard, you go to Cornell, you go here, and anything they can do, we can do better. And it's all about internships. It's all about setting up the connections and networking. And that's what I think I do better than anybody else. This is Rob Koll, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
How's Chapel Hill treating you?
I love the place, man. Gotta go I gotta rediscover it because it's all new. Everything that I remember is no longer. It's all gone. It's all different, but it's really cool.
Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey?
I am not.
Okay. Well, I was just curious now that you're back home, so to speak, if this is the completion of the cycle of the hero's journey.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm a hero, but it's certainly a journey. I'm not going anywhere else. I can guarantee you that. I have completed my whirlwind tour. People say, "Oh my God, you go everywhere." Like I was at 3 schools in 35 years. My goodness, I don't know if that's considering jumping around.
Coach, was it always in your mind to try to get back to UNC, or did this just happen to be happenstance and you kind of lucked out on this one?
I kind of lucked out on this one. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would have always loved to come back, but it's just a matter of opportunity. And those opportunities don't arise very often in our sport. It's just, you gotta have someone retire or die, and dying happens a lot sooner than retirement for a lot of coaches. And certainly Coleman's so young. I never thought he would leave. So I didn't think this would open up.
So coming in after Coleman had the program, how do you think he left the program, and how do you think he did when he was there? And do you think you're picking up a program maybe in a little bit better shape than the last one you were just at?
Well, considering the last one had been dropped and we didn't have an entire recruiting class and a lot of kids had left, yeah, it's a little bit better than that. I mean, we have some really good kids in the room. I was very pleased. We need to get a few, obviously some more good. We got to get great kids in that room, but it's certainly not a program that is void of talent, and that's exciting. And they're just great kids. So it's certainly we need to elevate the program, but it's not a rebuild like I had to take over at Standford.
Shout out to Ryan Warner. I listened to his podcast that he put out with you on Sunday, so got a little bit of a preview on some stuff to ask you. When you went to Standford, obviously they dropped the program. Coach Borelli was already somewhere else. The assistant coach didn't get the head job, so he kind of, was doing his own thing. Coming into UNC, you have soldiers already in place, and you feel like you can delegate roles a little bit better, so you're already rolling a little bit better instead of going $15,000 on the credit card to go on recruiting trips and stuff.
Well, it was yes and no. I mean, I've got Tony here, but then Tony took off for the World Championships with McNeil, so I've been on my lonesome here for the last 5 days. When I came into Standford, it wasn't that I was just by myself. I had Grant Leith came in shortly after I was here, but he was no help because he didn't know anything more than me, and we're stuck in the basement of this little crappy little office that they have. It's a decent wrestling room, but we're in a little basement. Well, there's no reception there. There's no internet. There's no Wi-Fi. And they had given it was after COVID, or one of the many after COVID set times, and their AD decided to give everybody 2 weeks off. So we just get there, and there was no technology support. There's nothing. We have no internet. So anytime I want to make a call, I have to go up 3 flights of stairs, go outside, talk to people. It was rough. It was really rough. And, so we had to build, and we're all I knew. So all I did was fundraise and recruit. And those were the most important things. but I didn't worry about getting reimbursed. I'm on the road, I'm traveling, I'm doing everything. So yeah, I got way behind on my reimbursements. I can assure you of that. And it was just rough. It was really rough because there were very few wrestlers there. They didn't historically train over the summer at Standford. They didn't keep the kids on campus because it was expensive. So we had to fix that. And there was just a skeleton crew of wrestlers. So it was a little bit of we're like, what the heck have we got ourselves into? Here I come here. It's in session. All the kids are back. I've got Tony, who's who I'm a huge fan of, who is absolute workhorse. Running everything, managing it, going overseas. And, then I came in, I have a list of priorities and goals that I want to achieve. But it's just so many things we have to do. I have to move out of Standford. I got to get the stuff from point A to point B. I got to buy a house. I got to get on board. I got to get off boarded. It's just that first week or so is just really, really rough. But finally coming out, I think by next week, we'll be ready to actually take a breath.
It's crazy, Coach, how quickly things turn around with one move sets off this kind of domino effect where Coleman goes back to OSU, you come back home, then all of a sudden Coach Ayers leaves Princeton, goes to Stanford. Did you, and I know the wrestling community is pretty tight and the coaching circles are pretty tight. Did you have much of a relationship with Tony coming in?
Yeah. I knew Tony for a long. I've known Tony ever since he chased me down the hallway, yelling at me for not having one of my wrestlers wrestle against the Iowa. It was screaming at me, called me all kinds of names, and called me a pussy or a sissy. I can't remember exactly. But it was something like that. So I couldn't stand the son of a gun. Like, who the hell was that? The guy's barking at me. Then I find out it was Ramos. I'm like, yeah, I hate that little prick. Literally, that's what I said. And then I remember I got to meet him, and I'm like, he's actually a really nice guy. I remember at one of the U.N.C functions, I'm like, yes, I like that guy, despite myself, because he's an Iowa guy. So but I've always liked Coleman. And so then when I went to Stanford, and my first call was actually to Tony. I tried to hire him, but for a number of reasons, it didn't work out. And so I was happy that he was willing to stay. And the reality is he applied for the job, so it's not easy. And he's built these kids, and it's he either take it one or two ways. Say, well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to become better, or I'm the hell with this guy. And I'm very thankful he took it in a manner that he's going to make the best situation out of it and grow. And I'm confident I can help him become a better coach.
It's interesting how some of those Iowa guys become so much more likable when they leave the Iowa City.
Really is. It really is. I mean, they're just annoying, and they take on the persona of their coach. That's not fair. I actually both like both those guys.
Yeah, no, but it's definitely, you saw it with Tony, I saw it with Thomas. Brett Metcalf too seems to be a little bit more personable, a little bit more likable now. So it's just kind of interesting. And they all kind of talk about it too, is, once you're off the island, you're kind of off the island. So it's an interesting take.
Going to Stanford, obviously you were only there for 2 years, but you taking that position meant a lot to the program. Do you feel like you accomplished any of your goals that you wanted to accomplish when you were going there?
Well, they're going to reach their wrestling goals this year. They're going to start showing up in a big way this year. They've got a great group of kids, phenomenally talented lineup. Another great recruiting class coming in next year. But the most important thing was to add stability to that program, and we had an endowment. We pushed that up to close to $20 million of gift and pledges, and that's a lot of money over a 2-year period of time. And then I left a sizable sum of money in the RTC account, and they've got a number of the positions sponsored through outside sponsorship. So yeah, I'm very pleased with how I left the program, and I don't think Chris Ayers has any complaints. I think if you talk to him, he'll be very thankful for what we left him.
Has he reached out to you? Has he sought any counsel or anything yet?
Yeah, no, I talked to Chris quite a few times throughout that process. Look, Enoch was my dog in the fight, and I'm very loyal to Enoch, and I think he is a masterful coach and would have done an amazing job at Stanford had they hired him as a head coach, but they didn't. They went with Chris, and I understand why they went with Chris. He's got a more accomplished resume, and I'm supporting Chris and giving him any advice and counsel that he needs, and I'm actually good friends with Chris. People will be like, "Oh, you're crazy. What do you mean? You were competing with him?" I'm like, outside of the matches, I think when we all retire, these wrestling coaches, we have so much alike. The only problem is when you're competing with each other, you want to rip their throat out. But I guess if we were comparing personalities, you're probably more than 99% more like that person than anybody else on the face of the earth. And so, aside from the competition, you'd be good friends. And I think the world of Chris.
What was if you could share, what was outside of maybe the team itself going to Palo Alto? What was one piece of advice you gave them?
Get things in writing. Make sure as far as that's one thing I encourage them to do, and also make sure you reach out to all your alumni. The alumni are fantastically, they're not just generous financially, they're just really good people who can help the kids along the way. And there's a cast of characters of, maybe 10 to 15 really important people that he needs to make sure that those guys are on the same page. We're not talking inconsequential sums of money. We're talking programmatically changing the trajectory of a program with one or two people, and it's all about resources. People say, well, he's a coach and teaching this and that. Yeah, 90% I would say 25 to 30% of high school coaches could coach any Division I program in the country. Technically, a single leg doesn't have to be. It can be only taught so many ways. Double, and when you look at what techniques are being hit, it's just not that complicated. What is the most important part is everything else, especially nowadays with all the NIL world, and at Stanford you still have to continue to increase your endowment numbers. The admissions is it's an arduous process to get a kid accepted into Stanford. I mean, and he's set up pretty good for this year. Have a nice runway moving forward. But it is a lot of work, and people didn't believe me, and I didn't believe people when I was told, "Oh my God, it's a different world getting into Stanford," because I came from Cornell, which was, you have to be a really good student, but it's a completely different. 75% of Stanford kids who score perfect SATs, perfect 1600 on the SAT get rejected. 75%. Now the athletes are getting it at a significantly lower level, but it's not. It's still, if you have 3 Bs, oh man, 3 Bs and only 6 APs, that's a question mark. And they take you their pound and a half of flesh before they take the kids that you ultimately get accepted.
Was it harder to get kids into Stanford than Cornell?
I honestly believe it's probably the hardest school in the country as far as admissions athletically. Yeah, I think it's probably number one. And Chris would agree with me. And he was at Princeton, which people would say is number two. Harvard, now Jay Weiss will probably argue otherwise. But I think it's negligible. I mean, I think you're splitting hairs. That
I got a recruitment letter for Stanford when I was in high school, and I was so excited because coming from New Jersey, manifest destiny, getting out west of California. And I walked into my guidance counselor office to talk to her about it. And she was like, Stanford, that's like the Harvard of the West. And all my dreams went out the window.
Yeah, I know. It's I was the same way with a lot of schools that weren't at Stanford's level. When I was getting those recruiting letters, I'm like, yeah, my parents were like, yeah, you're not getting into those schools. So. But no, I ended up coming to North Carolina. I was thrilled to be here. I was fortunate to get an opportunity to come here, and I tell you, with the type of network we've developed and that we have, I'll put up what my friends are doing against anybody in the world as far as just success.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not easy to get into UNC.
No, and there's certain programs that are particularly strong, and we have other programs we don't have. So you got to there's obviously there's certain majors that we got to stay away from, but you don't need 50 kids. You need 5 to 6, 7 great kids a year. And when I first started working at Cornell, I coached Spates. We'd recruit 100 kids, and we'd sign 20 of them. We'd get 20 or 15 to 20 kids every single year. We'd have 65 kids in the wrestling room. It was crazy. And that was our mentality, was we just got to get a lot of kids and see who develops. My philosophy now is, let's have fewer kids and spend more time developing those kids, and they can focus our resources on fewer, with the idea that if we give more to fewer, the results will be better.
Coach, you bring up going to UNC, and times have definitely changed since you were at UNC. I heard you say that there was not too many people at the home matches, and that never really changed throughout your 4 years. And you went to high school in Pennsylvania, and it was way different. So what are kind of your goals as a coach? Do they have the fan attendance that you would like? You got to build that up. You're trying to get a new wrestling room. What are kind of those immediate goals you can talk about?
All of the above. And actually, to send a newsletter out today, my number one priority is a improved wrestling facility. We have the one I wrestled in when I was here. It was a little bigger, but my goal is to take over one of the basketball courts. There's many upstairs just right above our wrestling facility, and if we could do that, you'll add I don't know, it'd be about 3.5, 4 mats. That's all we need. It doesn't have to be the Freeman Wrestling Center with all the glass and glitter. It's all about having that space, and having a kind of a real you increase the intensity. If you're worried about a pillar or a wall, you're always looking to your right and your left. I want a pasture, to put down the mats. That's our number one priority. Developing an internship program for our wrestlers. So when I walk into a parent's home, it's like, I can sit down and say, hey, you tell me, you can go to Stanford, you go to Harvard, you go to Cornell, you go here, and we can do everything they can say. Anything they can do, we can do better. And it's all about internships. It's all about setting up the connections and networking. And that's what I think I do better than anybody else, is networking out, making sure our kids, by the time they graduate, what they have on that resume, having a resume and having it look pretty, that doesn't get you a job. It's not how glossy it is. It's what you have on that resume, and you better have some darn good work experience. And I've already got about 20 of our alumni, incredibly successful alumni, in anywhere from medicine to law, politics, entrepreneurial skills like opening a franchise. I mean, you name it, real estate development, are willing to take our kids, assign them as mentors, and work with these kids. And just one more resource that we have, that's a unique situation where that they're going to know that they're having more than just me, more than just the school looking over their shoulder, making sure they're crossing their T's and dotting their I's, making sure they've got internships over the summer and full-time employment upon the graduation. And that's something we can offer. I really believe, hey, and I'm a broken record. Until they repeal the laws of physics, it's going to be taught pretty much the same, where if it's at Campbell College down south, or Raleigh, Durham, and or NC State, or Stanford or Harvard. It's the person to your right, to your left, that really makes the difference. And if I can come in and make sure that the connections that you're acquiring through your 4 years are just as impressive, and hopefully more impressive than anywhere else, we become the obvious choice. So that's internship. So I've got building, I've got internships. I want to build the RTC. We need to build our NIL program, and we need to build attendance. Those are the real big ones, the big five for me. I outlined that today in a kind of a call to arms for our alumni, and I've had probably about 150 email reply from different alumni, just reaching back saying, hey, we're going to support you, we're going to do everything you ask, and it's just exciting to be a part of it.
So a couple things there. I hate to throw a bunch of questions at you at once, but you just listed some good things. I know the internships are everything. I just graduated film school, and I'm understanding that now. It handed out my resumes and stuff, and like, oh, that would have helped. Now, is that more selling the parents on that? Do you think the kids understand that, or the type of kid you're dealing with at UNC comprehends that a little bit better than your average kid coming into college? And the other thing is with the attendance and the alumni, is that bringing more alumni back to the matches, or get more of the student body, get more of the community? And that alumni that you reached out to, have they been contacted before, or is this like the first time they're being reached out to and utilized?
Well, a simple answer for all of your questions is yes, because yes is the answer to every one of those questions. But let me start from the first one, and that was regarding parents. Interesting statistic: 90% of children ultimately matriculate to the school of their parents' choice. So yeah, I recruit parents. When I was a young man, I was insecure, and I was closer to age of the kids than to the parents, so I recruited the kids. As I matured and I read more, I read a research article talking about how kids choose their schools. I realized what a big influence the parents have on it. And I realized I need to focus on these parents more and let them understand what we sell to the parents, let them feel good about what we're doing. So I over time, and I had 2 kids go to school, so I have a different empathy for this experience. And so yeah, we talk about the parents. I always say, hey, help a kid, they like you. Help a kid, the parents love you. And so when I go into a home, I'm selling this to the kids, but this is a 17-year-old kid. All he wants to do is wrestle. He doesn't think 17 years from now that he's still going to want to be competing. The only difference is the venue won't be in a wrestling mat; it'll be in a business setting. And so for me, I let them know, if you send your son to me, I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to make sure he has got a great wrestling experience, and I'm going to make sure when he graduates, he's going to have multiple job offers. That's a big selling point for most kids and all parents. So that was number one. Number two, talking about attendance and talking about alumni. Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. One, you bring attendance in, the kids love it. They like having big crowds, but we're with this whole, with the internship program, with our giving program, because my goal also is to increase participation when it comes to philanthropy. We want these people giving back. I can't control how much someone gives. I can control how many people give. And the likelihood of someone who makes a gift to our program of actually attending a match and caring is significantly more. They become owners of our program. And that's my philosophy on how we do one of the reasons why we do development. It's not just giving; they're giving to the program. They now have a share. They're shareholders in what we're building, and so they show up at matches. And I'll tell you what: unsuccessful coaches, they will not do that. They won't build the fan base because they don't want to see. They don't want to be seen that they don't want to bring a whole bunch of people in and show us losing. And two, when you get a fan base, there's another thing that comes along with that: responsibility. You're responsible to win, because winning is part of the learning process. And if you're doing things right, you're going to win. If you're not doing things right, you're not going to win. And so what happens if you're not winning and you have a lot of active fans? You get fired. And so that's what happens. The consequence of having an active alumni base is you now have a responsibility to win. And so time and time again, I see coaches who wallow in futility. They also don't want to do alumni development, because those alumni are more engaged. They actually write checks and they run your ass out of town. And I'm not worried about that. I know we're going to win because we're going to do all the things that successful people do. And when you do things the right way, repeatedly, good things occur. And so I know the fans are going to be there. I know we did it at Cornell. We were doing it at Standford. And if you look across the state at NC State, what Pat Popoliso has done with the fan base, in primarily the high school fan base, fans at the college level are finicky. Students tend to be a finicky pack. They don't come out in droves. We want to attract those guys. But if I look at it, if I can get a 10-year-old kid and his family to become Tar Heel wrestling fans, we've got them for at least 8 years. And if they have brothers and sisters who are younger, even longer. if I get a fan who's a junior, freshman, or a sophomore, I've got them for 2 or 3 years max, and they graduate and they leave town. And that's the other thing, is this people who are living in this area, they might not even go to college. They might stay in this area. They become lifelong fans. So it's a better investment of our time and energy is to focus on wrestling fans in the community. And hey, if we don't have a match, all those NC State fans, there's no reason they can't become UNC fans at the same time. I also want to work with Pat. I want to get a home and away events. So each year we try to set a new record every match. We start off, maybe the kickoff in November. We have a match at the Dean Dome, or we have one over at his place at a bigger venue. And we try to build it to where you have 15, 20, 30,000 fans. That would be my ultimate goal. And I think I know we can do it. It's going to take a little bit of time, but when we got to get better, we have to be able to beat them. The best thing that's going to happen to NC State is when we beat those guys, it puts pressure on their administration to support them more, puts more pressure on their alumni to frickin' support them more. And so I know Pat, he's probably not thrilled that we're coming at him. And I was, I put a lot of, I goose those guys a lot, but I respect the hell out of them, and if they weren't beating us all the time, it wouldn't bother me, but I think it's 10 in a row. And obviously that's our goal is to win a national championship, not beat NC State, but if you win national championships, you're going to beat NC State. So indirectly, it is definitely one of our goals.
When is that match with NC State?
No clue whatsoever. No clue. I am absolutely not focused on the schedule at all right now. I'm just trying to survive and bring and recruit and fundraise and coach a team. I've got 3 priorities right now, and well, I just mentioned a whole bunch of other ones at the same time, but we're trying to do everything at once. And I'm right now also trying to hire my staff.
How's that coming? It's
coming, but it takes time, and you have to advertise for a couple of weeks, and then you have to interview the folks, and then they have to pass the background check, which they all will, but it just takes almost a month by the time it's all said and done.
Okay. And you said all the kids are back on campus right now?
Yeah, at Cornell, at Standford, they're on quarters, so they just are starting now. So it actually worked out fairly well for Standford folks. They could get a new coach in there before they were back in school. They were actually kind of a layover, or they were out for a while. I felt bad because they took my phone away and email privileges and said, don't contact anybody. So I could say goodbye to people who were on campus, but there were a few that weren't gone. And it just didn't feel like a good breakup for me with a few of them.
Not to get too inside baseball, but what's the reason for that? Was it not cool on their end?
I think it's just I think that's standard protocol. You don't want kids hopping on the portal. You don't want the temp for tampering. I get it. I totally get it.
Now, I know you mentioned before that you're still moving. Like, do you have all your stuff in North Carolina yet?
Well, I won't. The move will be the last week in like September 30th. This stuff my wife's out there packing still and moving it all out. So she'll arrive in a couple weeks, and we bought a house. We move in on the 4th or 5th of October.
Did you ever feel like you were at home in Palo Alto?
Not really. I mean, I love the kids. I absolutely adore the kids we brought in. That was the hardest. Really hard to leave them, but it wasn't just me. My wife really struggled. She struggled mightily in living in a little townhouse with middle of the night. You'll hear cars accelerating and screeching their tires, and then sirens, and going from where we lived in Ithaca for 28 years. And I always tell her on a house on a cliff overlooking a lake where when it got dark, it was black, and there was no sound other than crickets. And after all that time trying to move in there, she didn't adjust well, and she didn't adjust well. It meant I didn't adjust well.
You weren't in East Palo Alto, were you?
No. Almost wanted to buy a house there, but even East Palo Alto was a couple $1 million. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, Jimmy and I both lived in California. I was there a couple of years before he was, and I got I was over it pretty quickly. And he was into it a little bit longer than I was, but I
East
think
Palo
now
Alto's gotten they're a little gentrified. It's nicer.
Yeah.
It's not what it used to be.
yeah. Coach, you mentioned your rivalry with NC State. You also brought up Campbell, and you got Duke not too far down the road. One of the things Jimmy and I talk about pretty regularly, and I don't know if a lot of casual fans realize that North Carolina, I think, is the second most Division I wrestling programs in the country. That always wasn't the case. Do you see, I guess, within your recruiting and stuff over the last couple of years, you also see an elevation of the high school in the state as well?
Certainly. The problem is a lot of these kids are leaving the state, and they get really good in Carolina, and then they're not in Carolina anymore. But there is some talent in the state, and there was very little talent when I was here. A couple of them, Stokes from NC State, I think, won a national championship, and some heavyweights from NC State. We had Stacy and Tracy Davis who wrestled for us, but it was a handful. Now there's certainly much more talent in the state. But as you said, there's, I think, 8 Division I programs. You've got Gardner Webb, you've got Campbell, Appalachian State, Campbell, Queens College, NC State, UNC, Duke. I mean, that's 8 schools right there. Not to mention Division III. It's amazing. And so what I think is happening is now you have all these schools developing and spitting out future high school coaches and youth coaches, and there's a migration from the north to the south. So you're going to have, I think, NC State, state of North Carolina is going to continue to improve exponentially. When Coach Lamb took over, I can't remember the statistic. I think it was like 70 programs, 60 programs, and now there's hundreds of high school programs, and it's only going to get significantly better in the next couple of years.
Are there wrestling clubs down there like or at least are they starting to pop up like they are up north?
Of course, yeah. There's wrestling clubs everywhere. I mean, they're all over the place. If you look at Atlanta, they've got some great wrestling clubs. It's got some really, really great clubs. Problem is Georgia didn't have wrestling, and there was no Division I programs in the state of Georgia. It's a real shame with all the high school wrestling they have in Georgia. The fact they don't have Division I wrestling, it's an absolute travesty. And you could say the same for Florida and Texas and any number of states. But Georgia keeps producing truly really great wrestling, more so than almost any of those other states. There's superstar kids they're coming out every year.
You brought up that a lot of the North Carolina kids tend to leave and go to some of the bigger programs, but you just brought up Georgia. Where are you focusing on? Are you focused on trying to get a rope around the state? You focusing on down south, or there's good wrestling all over the place?
Yeah, there's great wrestling everywhere. We're not going to recruit Georgia or Florida, and we're not going to recruit Georgia or Florida. We're going to recruit great kids, whether they come out of Pennsylvania, California, Idaho, Utah, or North Carolina.
And you mentioned the importance of having that rival with NC State, and also when you retire or when you're not during the season, you're friends with a lot of these coaches. Was that always part of your philosophy coming up with your father being a coach, or did that take time and getting a little bit mature and realizing matches aren't the end of the world and you need your competitors to build up your program?
Yeah, I used to think every single dual meet was a national championship, and don't get me wrong, I want to win every single dual meet, but I was peaking when I was first at Cornell. I remember Tim Flynn was coaching Edinburgh, and they had a good team, and we had kicked the living daylight out of them every year in November, early December. And he came up to me, he was like, yep, Koll, you're national, every year you're national champs in December, or you're a national. And I remember it sticks with me to this day. And I hate Tim Flynn to this day because of that. It really was true. But it was like, wow, what am I doing? I had to look at how I'm coaching these kids, and I was training them so hard and peaking them so early because I wanted to win. It wasn't about the kids; it was about Rob. I was all about me. I was trying to reach my goals through the kids. It wasn't helping me helping the kids reach their goals. It was all about me. And I really feel sincerely. I mean, hey, I'm not trying to be, overly dramatic. I look back at that and I was so immature that it was my ego was getting in the way of my coaching, because I couldn't stand losing. And every time I lost a dual meet, that wasn't those guys losing, it was me. I was losing. And so you have to step back and not personalize it as much, and make sure that if you're at the end of the day, you're trying to focus on the end run. And winning the ACC championships is part of that, by the way. But it's also a national qualifier, so you can't win the nationals or be place high at nationals if you do well at the ACCs. But man, early Rob, he didn't have that mentality.
Was there a particular moment or conversation with someone, or was that just kind of growth and maturity?
I just told you about it. That was it.
That one with Coach.
That was it. That was it. I literally went back, and after Tim told me that, and I just like, oh yeah. I went back and I kind of was introspective and like, yeah, we are. There's a reason we're not. And it was more at the end of the year, because at the time I'm like, yeah, he's just mad because we beat him. And we did so well, but yet all those kids that were doing so well at the beginning of the year were not doing well at the end of the year. And guys who had been injured were doing better. And I remember that happening. And I thought to myself, wow, I got to reevaluate how I train these kids, how I push them, and how I schedule throughout the year.
And having that realization and coming to that, how much differently would you have gone about your own individual career as a wrestler?
Well, that was me. And Coach Lamb suffered a little bit of that too. He didn't like losing. And I think my senior year, I had 57, 58 matches. I mean, I wrestled nonstop. I probably weighed in 20 times. It was too much. And I always get hurt. I would get hurt at the end of the year. But I wanted to wrestle. I loved to wrestle. So I wanted to compete. And I would definitely have backed off if I could have. And back then we cut so much more weight than we do now, because we had a 5-hour weigh-in. Well, 5 hours, you convince yourself after 5 hours, you're fine. Well, not if you're cutting 15 pounds in a day. And I remember the one day we wrestled Navy. And I cut 15 pounds that one day, and I thought I'll recover. And I ended up losing that match. And the kid was a tough kid, but he shouldn't have beat me. And I just couldn't move. And it was so humiliating, because my dad drove up from State College and he just watched me lie on my belly. And, and that's how it was. I was wrestling but every single match for us was a national championship of sorts. And that's how I took that same attitude to my coaching. That's how I approached my coaching for the first couple of years.
You bring up how Coach Flynn's statement really had you make a 180 and kind of change your philosophy, and how you were peaking the guys. And everyone talks about your coaching tree and all the guys who've either wrestled for you or coached underneath you go out and do very good. When you have assistants, are you kind of trying to talk this wisdom to them and say, hey, this is what you need to change here. Hey, you're a little too full piss and vinegar here. Let's pull that back. Do you try to kind of bestow that upon them?
Well, I think actions speak louder than words, and so if you're with me, you're going to see how we're doing things. I don't do as much in the room as I used to, although I still feel like I have to have my hand in the room. But there's just much more science to the sport now, and you measure, there are so many more. You either have a whoop band or one of the rings, and you can see how these kids, how their bodies, if they're tired, if how they're recovered, you can tell how they're sleeping. There's so much more science, and it's so much easier to train the kids properly. Whereas in my day, 5 days, we're going to go hard every single day and see how hard you can push the kid every single day, and hope they don't get hurt. There's reasons why kids get broken down and get sick. And the other thing is the cutting the weight. I used to be a big weight cutter, and the more you cut, the bigger you get. And then I had guys like Kyle Dake and Cam Simas and Steve Bozak, all national champions, all up 1, 2, 3 weights, 4 weights. Joe Mazurka went up from I think Joe at one point was going to be a third or fourth string 49 or 30, 57 pounder. And he ended up by his end of his career, he was an 84 pounder. And he wasn't really an 84, probably a 74 pounder, but I wanted to get him away from Ben Askren because I thought he could win at 84. Now, ultimately didn't win at 84, but he did place and he had a great career and he felt good about the move. And you can move and you can do that. And I used to think, no, you got to be big. Well, you give up something to gain something. And quite often you're giving up more than you're gaining. And you certainly are giving up so much more as far as that, just the enthusiasm, the mental side. It just, if you're trying to do that for 5 months, and it's a significant amount of weight, it just takes the piss and vinegar out of a kid.
Yeah, you see that a lot now with the guys. It just seem to have a lot more enthusiasm and passion for what they're doing, and they talk about the love of the game often. And one of your former athletes just won a world championships, and he went up to 61 kilograms. Did you get a chance to watch him through his rounds and everything?
Oh yeah,
Vito?
Yeah, Vito's. Yeah, and that's the big thing. People wow, Vito, he's gotten so much better. He got so much bigger is the difference. He always wrestled like that when he was healthy. If you look at 2 years ago, he took second, lost to Glory, but the week prior to losing to him, he wrestled him after about an 8 or 9 or 10 hour weigh-in the finals and almost tech followed him. So the same people went from tech falling or 1 point from a tech fall to losing to him because it was a 2 hour weigh-in. He went in, and that was the difference. He just couldn't function. That's the only thing stopping Vito from dominating next year in the Olympics. He's got to be able to shrink it down. Can he do it or not? I mean, he's not small. You've seen some pictures of him. And but I don't think he has a frame to go up. And then you got Yanni there, who we hope that Yanni makes the team. He's got to obviously beat some great kids. But even though he wasn't the guy this year, I still think he's slightly favored. Vito's going to have to start now and be able to function. He'll make the weight. There's no doubt he'll make the weight, but you have to function at the weight. And I do think a little bit of that is a confidence that he has now going in from that world championship. I think he's going to find a way to do it.
Do you think that'll be a little bit different because it's not as many competitions as the college season?
Well, he's still got to call. I mean, if he Olympic gray shirts this year, but if he wrestles this year, he'll still be having those competitions. And I think his plan is to wrestle this year, but he'll wrestling 33, so that'll at least keep his weight down within striking distance. But that's a hard cut for him. 33 is not easy, because he makes it easy. I'm like, yeah, well, you're not making the weight. It's easy for you to watch him make the weight. It's not easy for him to actually make the weight.
Yeah.
Coach, I know Rich has a question for you, but I want to ask you, how important is it having that logo, the Tar Heels logo, being known as it is with recruiting, having good sports teams, football, basketball, that you can take recruits to? How big of a difference do you think that is in the recruiting process?
It's funny you asked that question, because I was telling someone that the other day. I was like, people don't understand that iconic brand and how powerful that is. And the color, just the color scheme. I mean, I'd be like, oh, that doesn't mean it did me. Literally, I remember going down to Chapel Hill when I was a 17-year-old kid and just loving the uniform, the color, that logo, that everything about it. And I'm like, I love it. I like, it just gave me the positive image of that, just a positive feeling, as opposed to other, logos and images that you just, you go. It's like, I'm trying to think of, I make fun of Steve Garland of Virginia, great school, but their logo is terrible. It's just the color scheme. It's like, there's nothing to get excited about being a Wahoo. You want to be a Tar Heel, baby. I mean, who doesn't want to be a Tar Heel? I will say the Standford tree, great imagery, great logo, very powerful, iconic. There's just certain logos that certain brands that people want to be a part of. And I don't know why it is that way, but whoever came up with that was right on spot.
Yeah, I used to coach girls cross country and track and field, and I had a couple high level athletes that their reasoning for wanting to go to UNC was strictly because of the colors and
Well, I
the
mean,
logo.
I don't care what reason it is, as long as it's positive. Come on down.
Coach, I was just curious. I heard you talk with Ryan about, your wrestling career and all that stuff. So I just was curious, in your post collegiate days, did you get to spend much time working with Dave Schultz?
Quite a bit, actually. Dave, I was overseas in Russia with Dave. I had actually had the dubious distinction of putting Dave into retirement. I actually beat Dave at the US Open, and he kind of went into retirement and decided to coach Foxcatcher. I was wrestling for New York Athletic Club. We went over to Russia together for 2 weeks, became really good friends. Some of my most fond memories, I remember we wrestled in one event and we're 18,000 people, and they gave us ice skates. And I remember it was the night before we were flying home, or that next morning we were flying home. We were both jet lagged, because people don't realize you're in Russia, you're in Moscow, but we might have been 10 time zones away wrestling in someplace in Russia. And so we take these ice skates, and we knew there was a frozen pond or a reservoir, and we go out, we decided to ice skate. And problem is, my ice skates were like 8 sizes too big, but they were what they were. And the police came, and we were like, what the hell? They didn't know what it was. Right. It was overlooking Red Square. There was like this ashy kind of snow, because there was so much back then. They just really sooty air quality. And Dave was able to speak to these Russian policemen and not get arrested. And it just was this really fun experience of ice skating on this reservoir overlooking Red Square. And I just remember that to the day I die. I'll remember that moment with Dave, because it was just a very special moment. Although it might sound not like very transformative to most people, it was a surreal scene. And I never thought of ice skating in Moscow near Red Square at 3 a.m. with Dave Schultz, my idol. Well, I put him in retirement, and then he trained me and coached me, and we trained together and went live quite a bit. And he realized he could still kick the shit out of me, And so I put him into retirement, and I brought him back in. I brought him back out, and I never beat him again. And I mean, I lost him like 4 times in overtime, but he was in my head, and he was so good. But I learned more from Dave in the few years I had a chance, 3 or 4 years I got a chance to work with Dave, than all the other freestyle coaches that I ever worked with combined. He was just masterful, and just a really good guy.
Yeah. Who was harder to wrestle, or more of a whooping? Was it Dave or Kenny?
Kenny never whooped me. I mean,
No.
those matches were great matches. And Dave didn't. No, I mean, Dave, it was overtime, and Kenny I beat twice, and I lost to him 2 other times, but both of those were 1-point matches. And one was in Stillwater, and I got completely hosed. So I wish I could have ended up on Kenny's side, because I did much better against him. He had a much better career than me. He was certainly a better wrestler than me, but stylistically, I matched up really well against him. I was very, very flexible. I could handle his speed and strength, whereas Dave's, how he would move. Remember his Russian ties, and he was sticky, and he was really good on top, and just he frustrated the living daylight out of me. Kenny, as great as Kenny was, I just matched up a little bit better against Kenny. I'm not sure saying I would have knocked Kenny off it, but I would have rather have wrestled Kenny than Dave.
Cool. Thank you.
I know you said you were a New York AC guy. Did you ever spend time at Foxcatcher?
No, I left New York AC and spent, I don't know, 5 years at Foxcatcher. I didn't live there. I would train in Ithaca, and then I would go down and spend a week in Foxcatcher. And yeah, I stayed in the big house with John, and that was a surreal scene, because he was, the movies didn't do justice to his insanity. And I've told story after story, and the movie also made it seem like Mark Schultz left, and then shortly thereafter, Dave was shot by John, which wasn't the case at all. It was years and years later that occurred. And I was actually at the house one time, and John was shooting a gun in the basement. This is the last time I stayed with him. After that, I started staying at Greg Strobel's house, shooting a gun in the basement. I went down. I was like, John, what's going on? He came out with a gun, He's like, God damn it, Schultz is in the. He thought Dave was behind walls spying on him, and I told Dave, and everyone just laughed. It's like, aha, it's crazy, but it wasn't too many months after that he ended up, you know. And I remember saying that it's the same thing as he's thinking you're behind there. He's actually trying to shoot you, but no one, even then, I never thought, and Dave never thought that he would actually play it out, even though he was playing it out in his basement. But he also did things that shoot at black dogs, thinking they were Dave. David morphed himself into a black dog. So the man was obviously insane, and the movie did not go into the real nitty gritty of his true insanity. And I think it was a drug-induced insanity. I mean, I never picked up on it. It wasn't my world. But I look back in hindsight, and I think of wandering the halls at night and always doing this with his nose. But I had no idea. I didn't know that. I didn't think about those things. So it wasn't, as I said, it wasn't a part of my life at all. But everybody's like, oh, he's always doing cocaine or whatever. News to me. But yeah, it was, and there was 1,000 other stories I could tell about some of the craziness.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate that. Coach, we got 4 rapid fire questions for you.
Bring him on.
See if they changed from the last time we asked you. Coach, are you a coffee drinker?
Yes.
How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
Keurig or McDonald's or Starbucks, anyway, it's always black. I don't want to waste. I don't want to hurt it. Why would I ruin perfectly good coffee?
Is there a local place in UNC you found yet?
Oh, I just stop wherever I go. I was at Starbucks the other day, and then today was McDonald's. I actually don't get mad. I actually think McDonald's coffee is not bad. It's cheap and it's not terrible.
Nothing wrong with a McCafe. You got Dunkin' Donuts in Chapel Hill, rather?
I haven't found a Dunkin' Donuts. A big D&D guy. Big D&D guy.
Definitely. Coach, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Rob Koll?
Do I have no idea? Well, guys know there's going to be hell to pay when I come in with a singlet. That means I've had way too many cups of coffee. I'm going to try to wrestle that day. So when the singlet's on, it's not going to be good for Rob.
You coming in like the coach of Vision Quest with the
Yes.
collar shirt underneath?
Collar shirt. You got the socks pulled up to the knees. I'm ready to roll.
Okay.
You need a picture of that on the UNC Instagram.
Oh, it'll be on there. I promise you. I got to get a singlet that fits me better. I've gained weight. It's like disgusting. I got to get after it.
Do you still have your college singlet?
My wife put it in one of those shadow boxes that's somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere.
Right from North Carolina, or is she from Pennsylvania?
She's from high school.
Okay, cool.
She's from State
Respect.
College. Yeah.
Respect.
Although she did grow up in Ames, Iowa, and her family was wrestling folks. So
Okay.
yeah, I always tell the story. She was sitting by a pencil sharpener, and she always seemed to break that pencil, at the classroom that we met in. Always breaking that pencil, 3-4 times in a class. Had to go get that thing sharpened.
Did she tell the same story?
Not even close. Not even close. But who are you going to believe?
That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
Exactly.
Coach, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
I haven't had a lot of time to read. If I do read, I read science. I'm big into science. I don't really as far as music, I'm Pandora. I do shuffle, and I've got a lot of country and a whole lot of 80s. So it's all the goodies, maybe a little 70s in there as well.
You have a favorite country artist?
I mean, I listen to Jason Aldean, but I listen to George Strait, and I've got Brooks and Dunn, and I don't know. But I like it. I like everything. I'm a flavor of the week. Well, I'm a 20-year-old flavor of the week kind of guy. So I rotate to throw a little Reba in there every now and then, So
Have the kids hipped you to Morgan Wallen yet?
oh, gotta love Morgan Wallen, little John Party. You know, like I listen to everybody. I actually listen to everybody.
Okay.
So
I'm down here in I'm near Clemson, down in South Carolina, but I went last Tuesday. I saw Willie Nelson.
oh wow. How was that? A small venue, I assume?
I was at a pretty big amphitheater. I had some stuff to do after work, so I got there a little bit late, and it was. I mean, we walked a half a mile from where we parked to get into the amphitheater, and we had lawn seats, and we were all the way in the back by the concession. So it was pretty well packed out. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a small kind of intimate event, and it was. They came out in droves for Willie.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you looked at my Pandora, I'd probably have Keith Whitley in there. I've got I've got some older stuff. I got Don Williams, but then you have Frank Sinatra and but Boz Scaggs and Steely Dan and Fleetwood Mac. So
Okay. So I guess as a Jersey guy, I got to ask you, Bon Jovi or Bruce Springsteen?
well, I got to go with Bon Jovi. Not that I liked them necessarily that much more, but I got kicked out of a food line one time in college with my wife and a couple of my buddies singing Bon Jovi. So
Awesome.
I think at the time we were probably overserved too. So, but I'm blaming that on my wife.
Coach, last one's a two-parter. It's changed since the last time we spoke to you. We mixed it up a little bit here, but first one is, do you have any guilty pleasures or pleasure, or do you have a pet peeve?
I'm a little OCD. Drives me freaking crazy when the guys have crap all over the locker room and all in the wrestling room. I'm all about order. Things need to be military precision. And guilty pleasures, man. I got a terrible sweet tooth, man. I am the worst. I love my ice cream. I love chocolate, and I'm gonna probably be diabetic, even though I work out a lot.
Okay. Do you have a favorite flavor ice cream?
I'm a coffee chocolate. Rachel's getting me what does she get? It's a coffee chocolate mint chocolate chip. It's
Okay.
pretty good stuff.
All right.
Coach, you are the man, sir. They're going to write books about you one day, and we're going to read them. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm not sure what they'll be putting in them, but god dang, that'd be something.
It'll be one of your athletes too.
You know what they'll do? They'll do it. They could write a book tomorrow. Just go on AI and just say, "Hey, write a book about Rob Koll." To make it 250 pages long. It's crazy. I love it though. I love this AI stuff. You guys into it?
Trying to get into it, trying to figure it out, but I definitely see the benefits of it for what we do in creating content.
Yeah, it's actually some pretty good stuff. I mean, it does everything for you. I mean, you gotta learn how to prompt, but it's very helpful. So
I'd have to take out my tinfoil hat to tell you what I think about it. But
it's a little scary. I have a buddy who does a lot of work with machine learning. He's actually a Cornell guy who's coming out doing work at Standford, does a ton of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it's like, well, how long until these things know what the heck's going on? How long do they could become sentient? He goes, well, you're assuming they aren't already. And I went, what do you mean? He said, well, if they're truly sentient, maybe they're just biding their time. Would you come out? Because if you're a threat and you don't have arms and legs right now, you're not, you don't have the ability to defend yourself. Would you come out? And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Mind blown. I don't want to think about that. But he doesn't think that's the case. I don't either, he said his timeline's a lot shorter than most people. He said 3 to 5 years. He goes, some of the stuff that's out there right now is just not being released is as far as some of the technology that's available. They're kind of slowly bringing it out, like in Google and stuff. I'm like, oh my God. Well, they're not going to replace the wrestling coach. That's the only good news.
I was going to say, we're just going to keep focusing on wrestling because that's our happy place.
Yeah, exactly.
So we appreciate you coming on and joining us. Jimmy and I are both down south here, so hopefully we'll come up and catch a match this season.
Sounds great. Take care, guys.